their family says, you need to get to America, go work for 8 years. The amount of money you can make in 8 years, you can bring it back and your family's set down here for the rest of their life. They don't want to move their family. They don't want to move their wife and their kids. They like the culture they have. They might not like the Mexican government, but in their town, they have a place that they grew up and they consider home. And so that person sometimes over here is referred to as a, military age male, and they're all coming in to be negative. And I don't think that's the case. But how do we give that person the ability to get, a work visa or some type of, and they're on a probation status? Hey, you come here and you work and you pay your taxes. That's great. We vet them a little bit more. I don't know what the answer is, but immigration, I think if we solve that problem and we gave the good people a way to get in, we could focus a whole lot more on the bad people trying to sneak across.
Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We got a special guest today, Jobe Dickinson. You are with, what's the name of that organization? BSA, Border Security Alliance. We just had one of your other members on pretty recently to talk about some of this border stuff. Unfortunately, as has been the case for some amount of time now, we've got yet another story this weekend of the actual fallout from this stuff. Before we get into all that, how's it going? And where are you right now?
Good. Thanks for having me on. Jobe Dickinson. I call home Phoenix, Arizona now. I spent most of my life down in Tucson, Arizona. I was a 20-year police officer and sergeant for the Tucson Police Department. About 7 years ago or so, moved up to the capital of Arizona and got into some lobbying, trying to get some good policy passed for supporting our law enforcement and our local communities.
What was it like growing up in Tucson?
Tucson was great. I loved it. I was born in Michigan, actually. Moved to Tucson when I was 4 years old, so I really only remember Tucson. Great place, great Mexican food. Good culture. I remember playing baseball was my thing, and my mom drove me all over Tucson Toros, winter ball, baseball, and be on the south side, the north side, the west side, and just, it was a small town. As we got a little bit bigger, metropolitan Tucson's about 1 million people now, but they wanted to keep it that small town feel. So, not a lot of freeways, not a lot of opportunities, and things kind of changed over the 20 years that I worked as law enforcement there, in my opinion.
Well, what made you decide to get into law enforcement in the first place?
That's a great question. People always ask, did I have family or anything? My grandfather was a county sheriff, but I really don't remember anything of that. He was in Oklahoma. I was a county sheriff for about 15 years, I believe. I've got one memory of like riding on his lap in the patrol car in a 4th of July parade. But other than that, I was drawn to it. I don't know. As a kid, I remember watching Cops and America's Most Wanted when I was 10 and 11 years old and thought, hey, that's a cool job. And you just see, the ability for people to help each other, to go out and solve problems, to figure out things on the fly, and just kind of where I fell. So towards the end of my high school career, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I went to community college for a little bit until I turned 21 and was able to test and got hired by the police department when I was 21 years old.
Excuse me. And what would you say? I mean, certainly Tucson used to be a small town. Obviously it's not really anymore, but how has the security environment changed there over, let's say, the last 20 years maybe?
Yeah, it's interesting because I tell people I worked over 5 different administrations, and I remember being a kid, part of our family, a weekend or so, we'd go down to Nogales, Mexico, walk across the border, do some shopping for some trinkets, get some food, and come back. And then kind of, over time, in high school, I ran cross country, if you can believe that. And we had a meet down in Douglas, Arizona, right on the border. And I remember running down a dirt road that just had a barbed wire fence. And later they told me that's the border with Mexico. Wow, But over the 20 years that I did, I saw the different issues from the border impact Tucson, which, it's 45 minutes away from the border. Anything from back in the day when it was big on smuggling marijuana, and they continued to use people during that time. When then it went to, we had, kind of the Sudafed meth lab problem which I think a lot of towns did, where you were having meth labs in your RVs or in your hotel rooms, your Motel 6 type hotels, the Breaking Bad kind of experience. But once we solved that as a nation, Mexico took over and did kind of the super labs, right? So then they just started mass importing crystal methamphetamine, and that was a big problem. And what you don't realize on the border community back then is we would have hundreds of pounds of marijuana or kilos of crystal meth come in, and little pieces would get picked off and left in our community. So the sales price was so much cheaper, so much more accessible. So you started to see a lot more drug use. You started to see a lot more violence around that drug use. The amount of like stash house rips that went on, because we were one of the first towns. You come up I-19, and then you get to Tucson, where you can go to I-10 and get to California, or get over to the East Coast. So it really increased, and it continued that violence and that stretch, I believe, just to do with our lack of, I want to say, border security, but also the cartels that saw the money that could be made and started working that. And they've been doing this, like I said, a long time, but the 25 years that I saw it, it's definitely increased.
Yeah, you mentioned stash houses, which for most people that are not in the business, I guess, maybe you've got a sense of what you think that is. Back in the day, maybe probably more drugs and guns. Now it's kind of a way station for human trafficking as well in a lot of these places.
Yeah, and I would say it was both, even back in the day, just not to the extent. In these houses, it's not what you see in the movies a lot of times. They pick nice neighborhoods. I remember, in city limits of Tucson, you had a lot of cops that worked there, and none of them lived in the city limits. We all lived in the suburbs. But you'd have these stash houses where they'd rent a house in a nice neighborhood, and you wouldn't see a lot of traffic. Car pulls in, opens the garage, closes the garage, and that's it. And unless you have some inquisitive neighbors or something, there's not a lot of action taking place in that. But yeah, they would bring in the people and the drugs. So if you're moving, 20 years ago, if you're moving something illegal, you could bring it in together. Where the strategy kind of changed now in the future was they divided the people from the drugs. That way you could, force Border Patrol to babysit or process the people on one side while there's still, the other side coming in, with camouflage and backpacks. And so that's where I could tell there was a problem. And in those stash houses, like I said, it's kind of been separated now. But yeah, human trafficking is a huge concern, especially over the last 4 years. And that's something that, again, at Border Security Alliance, we tried to advocate for, because a lot of people, when you talk about border security or immigration, it's like, well, if you want a secure border, that means you're racist. And that is absolutely not the case. I do believe that, America is a melting pot. We need immigrants. It's what's made our country great, but we need to do it legally in the right way, because what's happening nowadays with people paying the cartels to bring them over, it's not the American dream that people are thinking of. It's indentured servitude. I'd almost go as far to say slavery. And when you look at it in that perspective, that's when I think people would honestly realize, if they took all the information in, that this is a problem that needs to be fixed.
When you say indentured servitude or slavery, what do you mean by that?
So these people are coming from very poor countries, Central America. We've had people from over, I believe, 140 countries come through the Arizona border. But when you look at some of these poorer countries, to get across, the cartel's saying, give us $12,000. Well, they don't have $12,000 to give. So they make a down payment, they put some money in, and each step of the place, it's a little bit further, right? So they get them up through Mexico, they get them into, the border, then they get them across and get them into southern Arizona or into California or New Mexico or Texas. And then that's not their end point. They don't just leave them there and then all of a sudden they can live the American dream. If you didn't have a driver's license and you didn't have that cell phone that you have right there, what do you think you could get done? Could you go rent an apartment? Could you go apply for a job? Could you go to an ATM? You couldn't do any of that. And so these cartels are sophisticated networks that just, they say, okay, we'll get you to Ohio. You've got some cousins in Ohio, and we'll have a job for you there. Also, we'll have a place for you there to stay, right? Because they can't go rent an apartment. So they have these apartment buildings that the cartels have basically rented out. And now they're putting them in these hotel rooms, but they're saying, all right, you're going to have to pay us rent, but you don't have that job yet. So let me get you this job that's not quite minimum wage. And they're just stuck in this hamster wheel that they can never pay off the debts that the cartels are giving them. And so basically the cartels are just bringing them up here as labor. And we hear a lot about sex trafficking, but I think there's a huge number that we don't hear about labor trafficking to do these jobs. And, again, the other side sometimes says, well, these are jobs Americans won't do. We're too working in the lettuce fields or doing some of that. And they might be right to an extent, but if we didn't have that free labor or that very low priced labor, then some of those jobs might have to pay more to, have the right legal citizen that wants to work that job for the correct pay.
Yeah, this was very common back in the day. I'm sure it still is with pretty much every massage and nail parlor on the West Coast. Not sure about the East because I didn't work over there, but when I was with FDNS back in the day, this was a major concern for us because all the women working there, literally every single one of them, were basically indentured servants. They were working off debt primarily from, some of it was like nefarious things, but mostly it was just having had some criminal organization or another sponsor them to get them into the U.S., right? And of course, they'll do it because working for some amount of time for little to no pay is better than being stuck in China, right? So it was a very attractive offer for people who, as you mentioned before, had no other means of getting here. So very predatory. And then, of course, everybody is so pro good, anti bad until it's time to buy Nike sneakers or, actually enforce laws that cause us problems. I mean, the belly aching we've heard over tariffs and sanctions and deportations related to commerce are fucking crazy to me. The idea that you can justify that in your head, it's wildly inappropriate from my perspective that we feel that way. But it is, to a large degree, how people feel about it. And I, like, as long as there's an appetite for that stuff, this is the same thing with drugs too. As long as there's an appetite for it, then people will smuggle it, whether it's people or drugs. It doesn't matter what it is.
And I'll give you a great example of that. There's two examples. I always laugh, and don't fault me on this, but a couple years ago, I took my kids down to Universal Studios in Hollywood. I was like, let's go see Hollywood Boulevard, which me as a kid, I remember that being, a really cool place. Hollywood Walk of Fame and these stars. And now you go down there and it's just, gross and homeless people defecating on the sides. But we went into one of these little shops and you see all the illicit products in there, right? Or illegal, like fake Nikes, fake jerseys, and they're just up for sale. They're like, hey, here's this jersey for $20. And I'm like, that's weird. It costs, 120 on the NBA website or wherever. But it's just there in broad daylight, and we're not doing anything about it. There's no enforcement. That's a very small spot, but I'll tell you a bigger one that we have in this country right now. And again, when this goes to cartels or the Chinese government, it's all about making money, right? It's all about the dollar. And one of the things that happened that was huge during the last 4 years as Border Patrol was tied up, we shut down legal ports of entry because they didn't have the manpower, and they were taking that manpower to go babysit or process people coming through, holes in the wall or wherever the cartel would funnel them. But I look at vape shops. You go to these smoke shops, and you look at all the different vapes on the wall. And I'm all about, in police work, we had what was called harm reduction, right? You pass out the clean needles. So if someone's addicted to heroin, they're going to use heroin anyways. Well, we don't want them getting disease from used needles. Let's try to get them clean needles first, and let's try to get them on methadone. Let's try to get them services to get cleaned up. So I look at it the same way like tobacco harm reduction, right? You get a lot of smokers, you get a lot of military that were smoking overseas in the wars, and they come back and we know tobacco is bad for you, so we want to get you off tobacco, and we move into the vapes, right? But the FDA only has 34 approved vapes. on the market. And you look at that vape shop, and there's 1,000, and they're just targeted towards kids. You know, they're bright colors, and they're slushies, or they're video games, they're little Tetris games on the back, and all of those are illegal. All of those come through the port of entry, either mislabeled, or the ships aren't getting inspected because we don't have the manpower because things are tied up. And that's something that us as Americans now, we're just okay with, that we're just not going to comply with the law. We don't know what we're putting in our bodies. And, you know, that illicit trade, you hear fentanyl, but these are other things. And there's so many more options like that we talk about, that I think us as Americans, as, you know, we make laws, but the question is, are we going to follow the laws, or who's going to enforce the laws? And right now, enforcement is at an all-time low. And I think that's what's really hurting our country.
Yeah. I mean, you can enforce stuff at the border. I don't know that, to be honest, trying to enforce some kind of drug prohibition policy nationwide has never worked. Like, it's just like too broad of it. Like, and so many different people get heat for it too. The FBI, DEA, local police all get shit talked. State police get shit talked for not being able to solve that problem. Man, that is not a solvable problem. I'm sorry. Like, you can't. There's under every rock is somebody that's doing that shit. You know, from the libertarian side, they say just legalize it all. I don't know how much of a benefit that's going to have either, to be honest. I don't know what the solution to this problem is, except for better people. Like, that's the solution to pretty much every problem that occurs in society is better, more resilient people. Because they don't tolerate stupid shit and they don't do stupid shit for the most part, right? So there's some critical mass of people that need to be not even on the straight and narrow, just fucking responsible. You can do dumb shit responsibly too, right? And right now it's just like, I don't know what is going on in our culture right now, but I guess a lot of it is just postmodernism, where we're in a post-truth world where your lived experience is your real truth. Like, no, it's not. No, you're an idiot. And one of the ways that this is happening, I talked about Nike and some of these other organizations that are super predatory. Let's talk a little bit about some of the facilitators, because none of this stuff can happen without these massive NGOs, like the Catholic Church, for example, Southwest Key programs, and dozens of others that facilitate literal human trafficking across this border.
Yeah, the NGO problem, and it's amazing how we've kind of gotten our tax dollars into this, and we're okay with that, right? And I should qualify, so non-governmental organization, right? NGO, there are some that are out there that are beneficial, right? And I'm sure if you had Jonathan Lyons on, he talked about like the food bank of Yuma.
Yep.
Food bank is a great thing there for our society, help you when you're down. Now, when the migrants started coming over and started getting stuck in Yuma because they had nowhere to go and they just depleted the food bank, that's one thing. And I don't think by any means that food bank was here to help traffic, these migrants or help that. They were there humanitarian wise. And so a lot of people think these NGOs are just there to be helpful. In Arizona, southern Arizona, 25 years ago, we used to have the people that put the water out in the desert. That was the biggest, they'd put these barrels of water out there, and some people would go out there and cut the barrels open, thinking, oh, you're helping. Okay, I can understand. But the big ones that you're talking about are actually helping facilitate this human trafficking and hiding it. And it's, again, it comes down to the money, right? That we're taking our tax dollars and deciding, okay, this program, we think we vetted it well enough, and we're just going to give them a couple $1 million to help solve this problem. And I don't see how you lose the oversight, right? And I'm not going to say the federal government's perfect by any means, but when you have the FBI, you have ICE, you have Homeland Security, there's a chain of command and there's accountability. Just like in the military, I wasn't in the military, but I know my brother was, and there's accountability. There can still be fraud. There can still be some bad apples, but it's easier to control. And when we get into these NGOs, and you just pour millions of dollars into them and then forget about it, what do you think's going to happen?
Yeah.
There's corruption, and it's all about the dollar.
Yeah. In particular, I mean, other than the Catholic Church, which is a function of their size, the most egregious offender, in my opinion, is Southwest Key programs because of the way that the business has been structured. New York Times had a great piece on this, I think 2018, 2019. Everybody forgot about it, and this business still runs and still gets millions of dollars in taxpayer funding. But so at the time, they had a board of 5 business people. The business people borrowed money, taxpayer dollars, from Southwest Key programs. They went out into LLCs that they owned privately. They bought real estate and then leased it back to the program at like a 3x rate. So they were paying like $30,000 a month in rent for a place that would be $10,000 basically, just skimming money from taxpayers. And the New York Times, which at the time I guess still was semi-respected, did a whole piece on this, and not a fucking thing happened as a result. Now, in addition to that, of course they're going to facilitate because they're making all the money on it, but there's also, as you mentioned, room for these other predators to come in. I mean, Southwest Key programs in Phoenix had a guy with HIV assaulting children, male children, right? I think 4 or 6 of them. I don't remember how many it was. Yeah, he went to prison, but the organization itself has paid no penalty. They've lost no funding as a result of any of this stuff. It boggles my mind that we're still here.
Yeah, and we had an interesting one down in Tucson. Same thing. They had a kind of like a children's migrant shelter, per se, and because of whatever federal regulations, they, I would say, attempted, because we got it solved, but wouldn't let the local law enforcement go in when we would get 911 calls and someone calling in on a cell phone saying they've been abused. And they were trying to lock us out of that, saying, no, this is a federal juvenile detention facility. We're not allowed to let anyone in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, no, you guys are like a group home right now.
Yeah.
Millions of dollars with paying someone minimum wage to watch this, and you don't know what's going on back there behind your doors. And you're trying to keep out local law enforcement. That, again, that's the one thing. Being a local cop, I saw, you do need trust in your community, right? I can't solve every crime. I can chase down a stolen car and get in a foot pursuit and arrest a guy, but I need the community's help to actually solve a lot of the crimes, right? I need witnesses to come forward. I need someone to call 911. I need people to cooperate with me to help solve these crimes. And so there is something to be said about, you have some of these illegal migrants that are living in communities, and you want them to be able to talk to your local police to solve the bigger criminal act, right? But the other side of it is you put these people in the situation and they're being controlled. I don't think it's the fear of the local law enforcement that they're worried about. I think it's the fear of the cartel that's behind them, telling them what's going to happen to them if they speak up or try to get away.
Yeah, this is one of the things that really makes me angry about the way the Biden administration and the first Obama administration handled all this immigration stuff. So think about the average Venezuelan family who trekked up here to get away from that place. Certainly they should still go through our process. I mean, there's no question about that. But I understand the idea of wanting to get away from that nonsense that's happening down, not the government, but Tren de Aragua specifically. So what do? We allow them into the country, and then they take a deep breath, like, all right, I can start my life over. And then 2 or 3 years later, they see those same Tren de Aragua people that have terrorized them for their entire lives now living across the street from them. What the fuck does that say about our country that we allowed that to happen? I mean, there's a level of level of empathy that becomes suicidal when you're talking about border patrol or border control. It's like I don't understand the idea of just opening the gates and letting everybody in. That's not you don't have a country at that point.
100% right. You hit the nail on the head. And this is what I say, because let's just use the number 12 million. Let's say 12 million came in during Biden, and it's higher than that. But people ask me, you're saying, well, are all those people bad? No, not all of them, not anywhere near that. There are so many people, like you just said, that are coming up here trying to get away from something or trying to live the American dream, what they want to do. But there are bad people associated with that. And it just takes that small amount of bad people that then hurt everybody else, right? These are the, like you said it, they're trying to get away from these people and now they're here seeing it. So if we had a secure border, a secure wall, and then you funnel everything through a port of entry, right? And when I say it's actually a line I think the Yuma County Sheriff, Sheriff Wilmot used, we need a very big wall with very big gates. We want the gates to be open. I want immigration process to be fixed, to let some of these people through, but keep out the bad people. I mean, you're looking at what's going on right now in the news, and I think I heard the number right now from the ICE director. They're arresting 1,600 people a day, just about, and they gave a stat. I think it was up in Massachusetts, and it was 900 were already convicted, either murderers, rapists, felons, that had already been convicted of those crimes, either in their home country or here. And then the other 600 already had legal removal orders. So those people, I mean, 1,600 is a lot, but not when we're talking the 12 million or 15 million that we just let in, right? So we are taking out the worst of the worst. And had we just done this right in the first place, and I will say, I'm not going to blame this whole problem just on Biden. I'm going to blame this on both parties over the years. We need to overhaul our immigration process. We need work visas. We need, whatever we can do. It could have been fixed. And what I try to figure out is why it hasn't been fixed yet. My brother-in-law's wife, she came from Croatia as a student. Took her 9 years to get her citizenship. At the time, I don't think we have any beefs with Croatia. I think they're pretty good ally.
Yeah.
She came over to study, came over to work, came over, did the process the right way. But why does that take 9 years? What background check are we going to find in year 7 that we weren't going to find in year 2? So that's one of the things I really do think needs to be fixed as we talk about border security is also immigration reform.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that a big part of our immigration reform needs to be some real test of, let's say, the person being a cultural fit, which is, I don't know, maybe more easily said than done, but most things are. I don't think we should be, for example, spending taxpayer dollars on universities that are educating Chinese people that are going to go back to China. That seems like a really stupid idea to me. Mm-hmm. But people from, Europe, for the most part, are going to fit in here. I mean, politically, who gives a shit what they believe? I don't care about that. Just like culturally, do they accept the kind of, because right now Europe is being overrun by African migrants, and they're paying the price for it. I mean, Paris was in, they PSG won the Champions League for the first time ever, right? So what happened? African migrants and white French people get into brawls in the street because they hate each other. It's like, multiculturalism doesn't work. It doesn't work. The reason that America has been successful as melting pot, I don't think is the right phrase, maybe like a stew or something, because we all still are individual parts, but it all works together, is that it works together because people came here, left, they kept the interesting cultural bits about where they came from, but as far as like liberty, freedom, speech, violence, all that shit, they left that back where it came from because that's what they were escaping from. Well, when you let in the idiots and violent people, then it just comes here as well. It doesn't make any sense. And places like Croatia, certainly we should be able to adjudicate that case in a reasonable amount of time. Croatia, to be fair, has quite a bit of OC, like organized crime involvement in the government, but so does every country in that part of the world, to be fair, especially Eastern Bloc, but even down on the Adriatic right there. Italy's the same way. It's always been like that. It's always going to be like that. So the reason I say that is because if you're planning to buy real estate in Croatia, just know that you're going to butt up against the mob at some point. Be ready to pay them off to get your shit quicker. That's all it is. They made it's a very safe country for that reason, by the way. But yeah, like for the most part, some random Croat trying to emigrate to the U.S., there's nothing nefarious there. That's just a person that wants to come live here, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't like part of the immigration reform stuff. there's got to be some kind of cultural test. And I'm not entirely sure how to do it yet, because it used to be simple. We knew why people were coming here, and it was because they wanted to escape a shithole and come to a place that has opportunity. Now, we get more people who are coming here to, I guess, leech off the system in a lot of ways. And they bring not just their like food and religious culture, but also the political culture, which we don't want. Like it's not welcome here.
Right. No, and I agree with you. And it's a very tough question, but I'm sure, we've got enough smart people in our country that could figure this out, right? What needs to be vetted? What are the right questions? What are the possibilities? When you look at, again, just Mexico or South Central America, the workers coming up, I give some defense sometimes to people because you hear these, the border wasn't even on the media 5 years ago, right? And then just the last 4 years, it has really exploded and talked about it. But let's take someone, I know there's, a 23-year-old in Mexico that, their family says, you need to get to America, go work for 8 years. The amount of money you can make in 8 years, you can bring it back and your family's set down here for the rest of their life. They don't want to move their family. They don't want to move their wife and their kids. They like the culture they have. They might not like the Mexican government, but in their town, they have a place that they grew up and they consider home. And so that person sometimes over here is referred to as a military age male, and they're all coming in to be negative. And I don't think that's the case. But how do we give that person the ability to get a work visa or some type of and they're on a probation status? Hey, you come here and you work and you pay your taxes. That's great. Keep doing what you're doing and try to assimilate yourself into the country or make the money you want and leave. But if you screw up and all of a sudden you get arrested for drugs or you get arrested, we just had someone at the state capitol. She was testifying because her husband got detained in one of these ICE raids and gave the story. He was an illegal, but he came over. He served in our military, so he thought he was going to have legal status based on one of the previous administrations. And they just came and ripped him out of the house. What she left out was he had a felony warrant for drug sales after the time that he'd gotten out of the military and was living here without permanent status and was committing felony crimes. And so those are important, right? So I don't know, again, whether it's a probationary status, whether it's, we vet them a little bit more. I don't know what the answer is, but immigration, I think if we solve that problem and we gave the good people a way to get in, we could focus a whole lot more on the bad people trying to sneak across.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, certainly funneling is something that you do in a security situation. It's obvious with the actual border, you just build a wall and funnel people through ports of entry. But for ways to tackle, one, the people that are already here, and then two, the people that slip through the cracks, you head them off at the places where they're going to find employment. You know what I mean? And you mentioned it briefly, but this work permit thing is interesting because Germany had this. I wrote a paper in college about this, actually. Germany had this pretty well figured out back in the day, in the late 90s, early 2000s, with the Polish border. Poland was struggling greatly at the time, and Germany's economy kind of was propping, at the time, and to some degree still, propped up the rest of Europe. And Germany was experiencing a lot of illegal migration, primarily people that were working lower paying jobs. So their solution to this was twofold. One was on the enforcement side, and one was on the facilitation side. So on the facilitation side, if you were a Polish citizen that had a contract job in Germany, then you could receive a federal work permit, and you could travel back and forth across that border as you see fit to do that job. On the enforcement side, if you got caught without it, you're banned for life. You can never come to Germany again. And if you're a company that employs somebody that doesn't have that work permit, you don't get fined. Your business gets shut down and all of your assets get liquidated. Final step, I guess, in that process is to completely liquidate that business. So the sign of a good bill, which I say all the time, is that it's clear, concise, and enforceable. Clear and that it's obvious what it's saying, concise, and that it only applies to that one thing, and it doesn't have sprawl or room for interpretation for other shit that can be manipulated in the future. And then enforcement insofar as it actually has teeth. And I think that the U.S. could do something like that. I think they really could. I think it would be. I think you could still get what you need out of migrant labor with that kind of process without affecting American jobs that much, to be honest. Without, I guess, weakening our security position.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this goes back to what you said before is we need good people, right? And I know you had Jonathan on and he tells that story, he runs a roofing business and he made it very clear that he was only going to hire legal workers. And he's in a section where there could be a lot of illegals there for the lettuce fields or some of these other construction jobs. I mean, Arizona is known, at least 20 years ago, it was just people from Mexico coming up, but we had a lot of illegal workers. And so, yeah, if there's a consequence to that corporation or to that firm that is hiring these people, that solves it. And it only takes a couple examples, and then you hope that people just start to follow the law. I mean, that's where I think, honestly, I mean, let's just take drug use right now. We have stepped so far away in this country from holding people accountable, where possession of fentanyl is a felony, but we've gone to the softer side of no, the drug user is the victim, so we need to help support them to get them treatment and get them better. So we're not going to put them in prison. And I understand the concept of it, but you have to at some point when someone's refusing services, refusing to get themselves better, and they can't. I mean, they need help. Sometimes jail or prison is the answer to jumpstart that process. And if you do that with some examples, I think that really is a deterrent. I think it was a Star Trek episode a long time ago, watching 60s or 70s, and it was a society, and it had a sign. It was like, "Please keep off the grass," or "Keep off the grass," and the society was just perfect and clean, and all the Star Trek guys were like, "Wow, how is this running so good?" And they're like, "Well, we just follow the law," and they're like, "Oh, this is great." And one of them walked across the grass, and they got arrested. It was like, "All right, you're going to be executed." Like, for walking on the grass, they're like, all laws carry the same punishment. It's execution. I think that's a little extreme, right? But you see how that could have the deterrent to people. If I told you that if you got caught speeding, you'd go to prison for 10 years, I bet you wouldn't go 10 over the speed limit everywhere you drive. I know I wouldn't. But where do I go right now? I drive 7 over 5 over the speed limit everywhere I drive, right? That's just what people do in this country. It's like, oh, that's okay. So having consequences, and that's what we've gotten away from, in my opinion, to all sorts of crimes, whether it's drug crime, just everything in general, especially since COVID. The courts just stopped during that time and backlogs of cases, and we just let people reoffend and reoffend. And where I tell our prosecutors, where I try to tell, the good policy that we try to put is they want to treat the drug user as the victim, in their poor upbringing. I want to treat the person who got their house broken into and their items stolen so that person could sell money to buy drugs. That's the true victim. And we still need to take care of that person.
Yeah. So are you do you think that harsher penalties are something that we should be looking at, or just enforcing the law as it is?
I think enforcing the law as it is. I think there's so many, but I look at what has happened. So I'll give an example going back early on. Possession of marijuana was a felony in Arizona. This is back in the 2000s when I started as a cop. But it was just, okay, misdemeanor. We could waive it to a misdemeanor if it's just personal use. And then the federal government at the time, DOJ, if they had less than 250 pounds in their car pulled over, they would not prosecute it on a federal level. So they'd refer it to the state. Well, then the state was like, well, okay, less than 250 pounds. We'll just make that a misdemeanor, or we'll make that a non-jailable. We'll offer probation as our plea. And so all of a sudden you started seeing all these drug runners running with 245 pounds of marijuana. And the point is, the criminals know what the punishment is, and we always try to get our way out because we say there's too much work or we don't want to put people in prison for these small offenses. And he said, no, if you just enforce the law the way it was, and someone smuggling bales of marijuana from Mexico up through Arizona, that person gets held accountable. And when you start holding those people accountable, the other people in those circles see maybe it's not worth it. Maybe it's not worth for me to try to go through this. So, yeah, I'd say just going back to enforcing the laws that we have. There's a lot of laws already on the books, and we just need to keep them in perspective while we're dealing with people.
What do you know about the status of immigration judges right now? Because I know during the Obama admin, when I was at DHS, something like 40 to 45% of federal immigration judge billets were open for a number of reasons. One was that Republicans refused to confirm anybody and just jammed up the works a little bit. But there were other reasons as well. It wasn't just about that. And the Obama administration didn't really give a shit about it. So what's going on now? Is it like, I think there's like 520 or 530 total billets. And at the time, there was like 280 total judges working. Do you know anything about that?
Unfortunately, I don't have those stats of what's filled right now. What I can tell you is, as they did these street release parole programs for the last 4 years, what we started doing and why they said it was legal was we gave them a notice to appear. So they came in, they got detained for 24 hours, 48 hours tops. I think it's 72 they had to be released. And they were just given a notice to appear. So technically, a long time ago, they would be held in jails or holding facilities until they got to go have their hearing in front of a judge. Well, because we dumped in 12 million of these notice to appear cases, the court dates just kept getting backed up and backed up and backed up. The furthest one that I actually saw with my own eyes and heard was 84 months. So
Jesus Christ.
They're here in America. They've been processed by Border Patrol. Say, all right, you've got a court date 84 months from now. And then zero vetting, we don't need to know where you're going, zero pretrial services. So and now that puts them in this weird, are they here legally now? Are they legally in the country while they wait for their court date? So because of that onslaught, I've heard that we need so many more judges and prosecutors to fix that 12 million person problem that we brought over the last 4 years that, obviously they could use any help they can. I don't know what's filled and what's not. Obviously, getting judges up to speed and people confirmed, that's a process in itself that takes time.
I don't know the answer to that now. I think they've actually plussed up the number to 700 immigration judges now, but I'm not sure how many are actually filled. I've got two questions. One is, how can we possibly deport all of these people at the rate we're going? And the second question is, how would you handle cities and states that refuse to abide by detainers, which are a legal title? That's a legal, lawful order from the federal government whose supremacy clause purview is absolute in this regard.
So to your first question, how can we deport all these people? And the answer is, I don't know. That's going to be a tough one. This problem got so out of control. And by no means am I saying like amnesty is the answer, because that is not. But I do like some of the strategies that I've seen employed by this administration of telling people, if you self-deport, they've reworked the CB1 app, right? If you self-deport yourself, or we will help get you out of this country, and you will have a chance to come back in legally. I think that's an important part. Like you're talking about in Germany, if you don't have it, you are banned for life, right? You are never allowed back in. But with that said, we have to show them that there is a legal way for them to get back in, right? There is some process that's being worked on. Because again, law enforcement can only do so much. It's compliance. So that's how I think you solve the first one, is you get some strategies that we get some compliance from some of these people to and whether that's deport themselves back home or whether that's, some new vetting process that we're going to send people into like we said, whatever solution we come up with. Um,
Yeah.
what was the second question again?
Second question is, how would you handle cities and states who refuse to abide by detainers? And explain
That's a
what a
huge,
detainer is as well, please.
it's a huge issue. So, it'd be, let's just say I'm a local officer. I had this happen all the time, and I arrest somebody for, ag assault, domestic violence. You beat up a family member with a weapon, serious injury, whatever happens. They're going to go be held accountable. So they get booked into jail. But let's say they have a federal detainer that says they are here illegally. They have a removal order from a federal judge that they are not to be in this country. They're to be deported. So then they go into jail, and it's simple with that sense of that detainer is, before you release them from jail, because they're going to stay in jail on my DV ag assault call for maybe 10 days tops, and then they're going to get released on their own recognizance to show up. That you hold them in jail and you have the feds come pick them up. And while sanctuary cities think they're doing a favor to these people by not calling the feds, having the feds come pick them up, really what they're doing is they're releasing a dangerous person back into the community, but they're endangering the federal law enforcement side because now they have to go out to the community and try to pick this person up when they've already got them detained in a safe detention facility. Let's just transfer them on over, right? So law enforcement, we've got local, county, state, federal. You have to work together. Now, we have all of those law enforcements for different reasons, and they investigate different crimes and they go at things different ways. But I will tell you, I had a chief in Tucson that came in from the outside, and because immigration was getting such a hot button issue, he refused for us to work with Border Patrol. And when I say refused, I mean Border Patrol would call, "Hey, we made a traffic stop in town, and there's groups of people surrounding our agents, and we were ordered not to go there." And I just can't fathom how, when we have a school shooting, we have a major incident. Look at everyone that shows up. I mean, 99.9% of law enforcement are good and want to fight the good fight. And when they see something evil happen, they go to where it is. I remember I would be in a state auto theft task force, and we had a college of nursing shooting at U of A, and everybody went to that. We had constables, we had town marshals, we had FBI, and not 2 days later to investigate. 30 minutes into it because we didn't know what was going on and people were getting killed. So, yeah, the cities, I don't know if that really answers the full thing of sanctuary cities. I think it's ridiculous. Law enforcement isn't allowed to work together to keep our communities safe. And I think, on a federal level, if there is a local community failing to follow the federal law, you cut what funding. I mean, that's what we do in this country, right? We withhold funding as a punishment, and so that's probably the best solution,
Yeah,
in my opinion.
I think that's probably right. And then the next thing, kind of on that same notion, but more on the nation state side, I don't understand why even the Trump administration hasn't gotten more aggressive with China and Mexico about fentanyl, to be honest. Maybe there's stuff going on behind the scenes I'm not familiar with, but more Americans have died from overdoses in the past 10 years than died in all the wars we were in the 20th century. So seems like something to take seriously. If it were me, frankly, I would have invaded Mexico and put a 50-mile DMZ on that border. If 400,000 people are dead, that's a crime against our fucking country. That's an act of war, in my opinion. But not that's probably on the extreme side, but I'm an extreme kind of guy. I don't see anything at all happening, frankly, other than just policing the border itself. What penalty is Mexico currently paying for killing 300 to 400,000 Americans?
Yeah, I don't see any penalty right now. And again, this goes all the way back. I told you the meth labs, right, that we had in the early 2000s, and we had, like you said, our country has a drug problem, right? So we create the demand, and so that's an issue. And Are we able to fix that issue? We haven't been so far to win the war on drugs. However, when we solved the meth lab issue by making you give your driver's license for Sudafed at our pharmacies, right? And now I can't, when I have a cold, it takes me forever to get cold meds opened because the packages. Well, that's when Mexico started the super labs, and China was giving them the chemicals to do the methamphetamine super labs. So they already had that blueprint made. And so then we get into the opioid crisis in America, right? And doctors were overprescribing and pharmacies were giving out. We lived this whole thing for a decade. And so as America, we said we need to solve that crisis, and we fixed it by everything with big pharma, the lawsuits, and we've stopped the supply of opioid, hydrocodone, oxycontin from pharmacies pretty much. Well, what did China see? They saw an opportunity, and again, let's ship in those chemicals to be fentanyl, and our Mexican cartel drug partners will start making that in Mexico. And it's started coming across as pills, and then they're like, oh well, we can actually just bring it across as powder, and then they've changed it to some liquid form. It just they continue to exploit us, and I'm with you. I don't see any penalties, any punishments. The most I've seen from the Trump administration was an offer to use our military to go, snub out their cartel, which was turned down. But I think if we offer that and it's turned down, then say, okay, then you guys fix the problem, and what that is, what type of punishment, sanctions. I mean, that's how we work as a government with most countries, right? We don't go to war, we create sanctions. And those sanctions do have an effect because we are a very consuming society. We're one of the wealthiest, nation on this earth. So, we can have effect on other governments with sanctions.
Yeah, you would think. I mean, again, we're talking about three to 400,000 people, more people that died in all the wars of the 20th century that the United States was involved in, and I mean, I don't know how difficult it would be just to completely shut down the border and no incoming traffic from Mexico and ban American citizens from traveling there. That would put a pretty big dent into their tourism revenue. And if they want to play these fucking games, I think we should play them. It's just because we're larger and we can handle the hit, it's not smart to take it. You know what I mean? Right. It conditions the enemy to continue coming after you, and at some point they're going to hit a critical nerve. That's how it works. This is completely unacceptable from a security standpoint. You would never allow this, but somehow it's ongoing. I don't know if there's something going on behind the scenes or not, and certainly border crossings have been curtailed to a large degree, but somebody's got to pay for this, and nobody has.
Border crossings are down, and drug seizures are starting to go back up. So that's going to happen, just like it did 8 years ago. The drug seizures will go up, but by no means are we getting all the drugs. That, like you said, we're not winning this war. We play cat and mouse is what we play. And so, at what time, instead of playing cat and mouse, do we just say, all right, game's over. We're switching the rules. And I agree with you. There's got to be something done.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. To be honest, the behavior of late from the admin has been odd. So I very rarely have any expectation of politicians. I think they're the worst people in the world. But anyways, let's move back to you. So tell me about your organization and what you guys do exactly.
So it was one of those things, Border Security Alliance. As I worked, I got involved in our union, and Arizona's a right to work state, so it's an association. But we lobby for, or we try to make laws to protect police officer rights. And I would go up to the Capitol, and I would see some just really bad policy being put into effect. Excuse me, not on purpose, but on. They just didn't know better. They heard of a problem and they tried to solve it. And like you said, the law that they were writing was not clear, was not concise, and probably tried to tackle 8 problems instead of 1. And so Border Security Alliance is just a nonprofit. As I I'm still the executive director for Combined Law Enforcement Associations of Arizona. So I still fight for lobbying for police officer rights in the state. And I saw a void knowing that our statewide represents some border patrol agents and seeing what was going on, that we need to get the right information. We need to advocate for good public policy to our politicians who end up making the laws, and that would make laws that we would be able to enforce. And it's, our mission statement is to advocate good public policy, protect local communities, and support law enforcement while combating illicit trade and drug trade. So really it's taking voices. I feel like even though I've been retired now, I still have my contacts, boots on the ground, officers on the street, and try to hear what they're saying, as well as local communities, and take that to the politicians. I can tell you, like in Arizona right now, I talked about the illegal vapes earlier, that are sold, and just this last session, we were trying to pass a registry bill that basically, if you walked into or the average Joe walked into a vape shop, if you see something for sale in a licensed business, my mind just thinks it's legal, it's okay, it's been vetted as safe, and I can buy it. Well, that's not the case, right? There's 34 legal FDA approved vapes, and there's 1,000 on the shelf. So we were trying to make a registry bill in Arizona that would give local law enforcement the ability to say, these are the legal things that are allowed to be sold. It would be to the public, they could see it, and kind of trying to protect our children from products that are targeted towards them, and give a little local law enforcement ability, because the federal law enforcement is not enforcing it, and doesn't have the manpower. I don't know what the case is. So that's one example where we tried to do a bill at the state level to help, protect our communities. Unfortunately, it was a little controversial, I guess, that small businesses wanted to be able to sell illegal products. So it didn't pass this session, but it's something that we will continue to work on. That's the main thing what BSA is there for, just to try to bring some common sense to this world, to the politicians, so we can get some good policy passed.
And what are you guys working on now?
Really what we've been trying to do as well, we've got some coalition members in Texas. We're trying to expand our message. Our original board was out of Arizona, just because that's where I'm from, and that's what we got. I think we have some really good voices on our board. And so we're trying to expand a little bit. Jonathan has testified federally several times, brought federal delegations to Yuma to show them what the actual problems are. We had 11 attorneys general, sorry, from across the country. We gave them a border tour, show them what the issues were, and why it's not just, they were from South Carolina, North Dakota, Mississippi, Kentucky, all over the country, and show them why a secure border or a not secure border has a big effect on their state, thousands of miles away. And it was a great tour. So again, just trying to get our message out there, as to you're not racist if you believe you need a secure border. That there's reasons for a secure border, and I personally try to talk to the other side as much as I can, just to inform them some of the unintended consequences that maybe they don't see. And I'm also open to try to learn, their points of view, and see if we can come to some type of compromise in the middle.
What, I guess, would you say are some of the most common misconceptions?
Again, I think the biggest one, if you believe in, not letting immigrants in, you're a racist. I hear that all the time. Oh, you're just a white guy and you're racist. You're afraid of other countries. Not at all. I mean, I grew up in Southern Arizona. The Mexican culture is great and huge in Tucson, and I love it. It's part of my culture. I mean, I was raised in it at this point. But that's one of the misconceptions. And then the misconception of just, okay, if we have a law on the books, then it's okay. Like, people are going to follow it. And again, trying to get that enforcement, that, when we shut down legal ports of entry because we're babysitting over here, that what effects does that have, right? That now you can't get goods in, you can't get people in or out. There's so many misconceptions out there. And Jonathan's great too, when you talk about the effects on the local hospitals, the effects on the food bank, Those are true stories. The effects on the legitimate NGOs in Tucson. I mean, some of the churches, some of the shelter space, we're taking that away from the people, the local people that need it. That's where I laugh, like New York City, and all of a sudden, they called in a crisis. Oh, we can't handle this many migrants, and I'm like, you guys have just a percentage of what comes across these small border towns that we've been dealing with for, multiple decades. So, trying to get those problems out there so everyone can see this isn't a racist issue or a non-humanitarian issue.
Yeah. I mean, those are all silly arguments to make in the first place. So, yeah, really dumb, in my opinion. Well, look, I appreciate you coming today. It's very interesting stuff. People know that there are problems at the border, and there are problems with even internally how we handle immigration, both in enforcement and facilitation. It's pretty much a mess from top to bottom. So I appreciate you taking the time to get involved in this stuff and educate people, because most people, like most people know there's a problem. They just have no idea what the problem actually is. And I think putting numbers to it and putting faces to it helps, honestly.
And if you want to find us, we're on all the social stuff, www.bsa-us.org, or we're on X as well under Border Security Alliance. So just try to keep yourself informed, or your audience, keep yourself informed. If there's questions, bring them to us, or ideas. We'd love to hear them.
Yeah, thanks for that, and thanks for coming today. We really appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir, and thank you all for listening. This has been Citizen.